Stay with me, sir.
Tanya Reid had 30 seconds to choose between the train that could change her life and the stranger collapsing on the platform beside her. While 50 people walked past checking their phones, she dropped to her knees in the rain and pressed her hands against an old man's chest, feeling his heartbeat stutter beneath her fingertips. She did not know that the business card in his pocket would become the key to everything she had ever wanted, or that saving his life would cost her the interview she had sacrificed everything to reach. All she knew was that everyone else kept walking, and she could not. Welcome to Story Theater. Take your seat, silence your phones and get ready to enjoy the story. 4 in the morning. The streets of Milwaukee held their breath in that strange hour when night refuses to surrender, and dawn has not yet claimed its throne. Tanya Reid moved through the darkness alone, her footsteps the only sound puncturing the silence. The air carried the ghost of yesterday's rain, mixed with the sharp, bitter promise of coffee from the all-night diner 3 blocks away. Each step in her worn sneakers produced a soft scuffing sound against wet pavement, a rhythm that had become the soundtrack of her exhaustion. She pulled her thin jacket tighter. The cold found every gap in the fabric, every place where the seams had begun to fray. Her fingers ached from the double shift she had just finished, serving coffee and clearing tables until her feet screamed for mercy, then scrubbing office floors until her knees bore the imprint of industrial carpet. But this was not suffering. This was love translated into labor. Every dollar she earned carried her younger brother Marcus one step closer to his college dreams. The weight of 2 jobs pressed down on her shoulders like invisible hands. Her body moved forward while her mind calculated in endless loops. Rent due in 5 days. Marcus needed new textbooks. The gas bill sat unopened on the kitchen counter, because knowing the number would not change her ability to pay it. She had become an expert at this mathematics of scarcity, this algebra of sacrifice, where X always equaled more work and Y always meant less sleep. A car passed, its headlights painting her shadow, long and thin against a brick wall before swallowing it back into darkness. Tanya barely noticed. She was thinking about the morning shift at the diner, about Mr. Patterson, who always left exact change and never a penny more, about the grease stains on her uniform that no amount of scrubbing could erase. Then the radio from an open window caught her attention. The announcer's voice cut through the pre-dawn quiet with unexpected clarity. Benton Systems announces open recruitment for entry-level positions. Applications being accepted through Friday. The words hung in the air like a question mark. Benton Systems. She had heard the name before, seen their glass tower, reflecting sunlight like a promise she was never meant to touch. Something shifted in her chest. Not hope exactly. Hope required too much energy. But perhaps its younger sibling. Possibility. The smallest crack in the wall she had built around her expectations. Tanya stopped walking. Her reflection stared back at her from a dark storefront window. Exhausted eyes. Hair pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days. But for just a moment, something else flickered across her features. A lightness. A dangerous thought that whispered maybe today could be different. She allowed herself 3 seconds of imagination. A steady paycheck. Benefits. Coming home before midnight. Watching Marcus graduate without wondering how to pay for the ceremony. 3 seconds. Then she started walking again. But the weight on her shoulders felt different now. Still heavy, but no longer quite so crushing. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and broken promises. Tanya moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her body operating on autopilot while her mind drifted somewhere between exhaustion and hope. The morning rush had thinned to a scattering of regulars who nursed their cups and read yesterday's newspapers. Her feet ached in shoes that had long ago given up any pretense of arch support. Every step sent small jolts of pain up her calves, but she had learned to ignore these conversations her body tried to have with her. She was refilling Mr. Henderson's coffee, watching the dark liquid spiral into his chipped ceramic mug, when her phone vibrated against her hip. The sensation startled her. Nobody called during her shift. Nobody called at all unless something was wrong. Her hand trembled slightly as she set down the pot, and coffee sloshed over the rim onto the saucer. Mr. Henderson did not notice. He never did. The number on the screen meant nothing to her. She almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But something made her thumb move, made her press the green button and lift the device to her ear. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Hello, Miss Reid. This is Jennifer calling from Human Resources at Benton Systems." The woman's voice was crisp, professional, impossibly confident. "We received your application for the administrative assistant position. Are you available for an interview this afternoon at 2 o'clock? The diner tilted. Not literally, but Tanya felt the ground shift beneath her worn sneakers. Her free hand gripped the edge of the nearest table, knuckles whitening. This afternoon. 2 o'clock. The words repeated in her mind like a mantra, like a prayer she had not known she was whispering. Yes, she managed. Yes, I can be there. Excellent. Please bring a copy of your resume and arrive 15 minutes early. The address is on our website. We'll see you then. The line went dead. Tanya stood frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, staring at nothing. Around her, the diner continued its mundane rhythm. Forks scraped against plates. The old radio behind the counter played something forgettable. Nobody knew that her entire world had just cracked open. She checked her wallet in the back room, fingers moving through the bills with desperate arithmetic. $20. That was everything until Friday's paycheck. The train ticket would cost $10. That left 10 for emergencies, for Marcus's lunch money, for the million small catastrophes that ambushed people who could not afford them. Her throat tightened. This was not a choice. This was survival disguised as opportunity. When her shift ended, she found Marcus in their apartment, textbooks spread across the kitchen table like a paper fortress. He looked up when she entered, and something in her face made him sit straighter. I have an interview, she said. The words felt strange in her mouth, too big, too fragile. At Benton Systems. If this works out, if they hire me, you'll get your own room. We can move somewhere better. Marcus's eyes widened, then softened with something that looked dangerously close to hope. He was 16 and still believed in her, still trusted that she could pull miracles from empty pockets. You'll do great, he said. She wanted to believe him. Instead, she checked the train schedule and counted her money again. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she had skipped breakfast and would probably skip lunch. But in her bag, carefully protected in a plastic folder, sat her resume. She held onto that folder like it contained the blueprints to a different life. Because maybe it did. Late winter rain fell in sheets that turned the world gray and indistinct. Milwaukee Station buzzed with the peculiar energy of people in transit, each person locked inside their own small universe of glowing screens and wireless earbuds. They moved past each other like ghosts, shoulders hunched against the cold, eyes fixed on destinations that existed only in their phones. Nobody looked up. Nobody looked at anyone. Tanya stood on the platform, her interview folder clutched against her chest beneath her jacket, trying to keep the rain from seeping through to the precious pages inside. Her hair hung in damp strands around her face. She had tried to style it that morning, had spent 15 minutes with a borrowed curling iron, but the weather had other plans. Now she looked exactly like what she was. Someone who could not afford an umbrella. Someone who rode trains instead of calling cars. The departure board blinked its mechanical promises. Track 7. 2 minutes. She positioned herself near the platform edge, ready to board the moment the doors opened. Around her, the crowd maintained their disconnected symphony of silence. A businessman scrolled through emails. A college student bobbed her head to music only she could hear. A mother wrestled a stroller while talking into her phone. And then Tanya saw him. The old man sat alone on a wooden bench 20 feet away, his white hair plastered to his skull by rain. He wore an expensive suit that hung oddly on his frame, as if he had recently lost weight, and his hand clutched at something invisible near his chest. His face had gone the color of old newspaper. Even from a distance, Tanya could see the tremor in his shoulders, the way his breath came in short, desperate gasps. He tried to stand. His legs buckled. He collapsed back onto the bench, then slid sideways, his body crumpling like paper as he hit the concrete platform. Nobody moved. The businessman kept scrolling. The student kept nodding to her music. The mother pushed her stroller toward the approaching train. In a crowd of 50 people, not one person broke their stride. Tanya looked at the train pulling into the station. Track 7. Her train. The one that would carry her to Benton Systems, to the interview, to the fragile possibility of a better life. Steam hissed from beneath the carriages. Doors would open in 30 seconds. Maybe less. She looked back at the old man. He was not moving now. His chest rose and fell in shallow movements that she could barely detect. Rain pooled around his body, mixing with something else. Blood, maybe, from where his head had struck the ground. Time crystallized into a single, terrible choice. The train or the man. Her future or his present. Everything she had worked for, every double shift, every night Marcus had gone to bed while she scrubbed floors, all of it balanced against a stranger's life. Her feet made the decision before her mind caught up. The interview folder slipped from her fingers and hit the wet platform with a slap that nobody heard. She was running before she knew she had started, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles. her voice tearing from her throat in words that felt inadequate and enormous all at once. "Stay with me, sir. Somebody call 911. She dropped to her knees beside him, rain soaking through her clothes, her hands hovering over his chest because she did not know what to do, but she knew she had to do something. Behind her, the train doors opened with a pneumatic sigh. Passengers boarded. The businessman, the student, the mother with her stroller. They stepped around her kneeling form as if she were just another obstacle in their path. The doors closed. The train pulled away, and Tanya pressed her palm against an old man's chest, feeling for a heartbeat while her own heart broke. The sirens cut through the rain like a knife through fabric. Tanya stayed beside the old man, her hand on his shoulder, feeling the shallow rise and fall of his breathing. A small crowd had finally gathered, phones raised to record rather than help. She ignored them. Her world had narrowed to this stranger's pulse beneath her fingertips and the terrible mathematics of what she had just sacrificed. The paramedics moved with practiced efficiency, their reflective jackets bright against the gray station. They asked questions in calm voices. How long had he been down? Was he conscious? Tanya answered as best she could, but her voice sounded distant, as if someone else was speaking through her mouth. They loaded him onto a stretcher with quick, sure movements. One of the EMTs, a woman with kind eyes and tired lines around her mouth, looked at Tanya's kneeling form. "You did good," she said simply. But Tanya could not feel good. She felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything except the numb realization that her train was gone. And her interview was slipping away with every passing second. "He's asking for you," the other paramedic called from inside the ambulance. "Keeps saying someone needs to stay with him." Tanya climbed into the ambulance because there was no choice. The old man's hand had found hers, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who had just collapsed. His eyes fluttered open and closed, consciousness coming and going like a weak radio signal. His lips moved, forming words that barely made it past his teeth. "They're waiting for me," he whispered. "The meeting. They're waiting." "Sir, you need to rest," Tanya said, but he shook his head with surprising violence. "Important. So important. Can't miss it." She understood that desperation. She had felt it herself less than an hour ago, racing through rain to catch a train that would carry her towards something better. Now she was racing in the opposite direction, watching that possibility recede with every block the ambulance covered. The hospital swallowed them in fluorescent light and antiseptic smell. Doctors appeared with clipboards and questions. They spoke in medical language she only half understood. Beta blockers, dehydration, cardiac episode. The old man was wheeled away, his hands slipping from hers with a reluctance that felt almost childlike. She was left alone in a waiting room that smelled like fear and industrial cleaner. The plastic chairs were hard beneath her. Her clothes were still damp, and she had started to shiver, though whether from cold or shock she could not say. She pulled her phone from her pocket with hands that would not quite steady. 217. The interview had started 17 minutes ago. She stared at the number for human resources, her thumb hovering over the call button. What could she possibly say? They would not care. They had other applicants, people who showed up on time, people whose kindness did not interfere with their ambition. She retrieved her interview folder from where the paramedics had gathered it, the pages now water-stained and warped. Somewhere in her bag was the train ticket she had not used, $10 she could not get back. She looked at her reflection in the dark window. Mascara smudged beneath her eyes, hair hanging in damp tangles. The girl who had left home that morning with hope pressed against her chest was gone. Tanya closed her eyes and waited for nothing. An hour passed in that waiting room, or maybe it was 3. Time had lost its usual shape. Tanya sat with her damp clothes slowly drying against her skin, leaving her itchy and uncomfortable. Other people came and went. A teenager with a skateboard injury, an elderly woman clutching her husband's arm. They all looked past her, as if tragedy were contagious. Then a nurse appeared, her scrubs patterned with cheerful cartoon bears, and led her down a corridor that smelled like chemicals pretending to be lemons. The old man sat propped up in a hospital bed, looking smaller than he had on the platform. Without the rain and panic, Tanya could see him clearly. Deep lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting at documents. Silver hair that had probably been dark once. Hands that trembled slightly as they smoothed the thin blanket across his lap. But his eyes were sharp, intensely focused, the kind of eyes that missed nothing. "You saved my life," he said. No preamble, no small talk, just statement of fact delivered in a voice that was used to being heard. Tanya felt her face grow warm. Anyone would have done the same thing. No. The word came out flat, absolute. No, they would not have. "I watched 50 people walk past me. You were the only one who stopped. She had no answer to that. What could she say? That she had been raised to help people. That seemed arrogant. That she had acted without thinking. That was true but made her sound foolish. So she said nothing and studied the linoleum floor instead. The old man reached for the suit jacket draped over the chair beside his bed. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if his body had not quite forgiven him for collapsing. From the inner pocket, he withdrew a business card. Cream-colored stock, expensive weight, the kind that announced importance before you even read the words. Take this, he said, holding it out. Call my office tomorrow. I want to thank you properly. Tanya accepted the card because refusing felt rude. She glanced at it briefly. Henry Preston. Some corporate title with too many words. An address downtown. She tucked it into her bag without really reading it, filing it away in the mental category of things that would never matter. You do not need to thank me, she said quietly. I am just glad you are okay. The doctor said it was a reaction to my medication mixed with dehydration. Henry's voice carried the particular irritation of a man unused to his body betraying him. Foolish. I should have known better. They sat in silence for a moment. Tanya became acutely aware of how she must look. Hair still damp and tangled. Makeup smeared. Her good interview blouse wrinkled and spotted with rain. She felt suddenly, desperately tired. The adrenaline that had carried her through the last 2 hours was draining away, leaving behind only the hollow awareness of everything she had lost. I should go, she said, standing abruptly. Her legs wobbled slightly, and she had to grip the bed rail to steady herself. Henry studied her with those sharp eyes. Are you all right? You look pale. I am fine. Just tired. The lie tasted bitter. She was not fine. She was broken, jobless, and had just sacrificed her one chance at something better. But you did not say these things to strangers in hospital rooms. Outside, the rain had stopped. The bus home took 40 minutes and cost her last $3. She sat in the back and stared at her reflection in the dark window. The business card felt weightless, meaningless. Marcus was waiting when she got home, his textbooks still spread across the kitchen table. He looked up when she walked through the door, and his face went through expressions too quick to name. Hope, confusion, then something that looked dangerously close to pity. How did it go? He asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. I did not make it. The words came out flat, drained of emotion. There was an emergency. A man collapsed at the station. Marcus stood up so fast his chair scraped against the linoleum. Are you okay? I am fine. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I helped him. Called an ambulance. By the time everything was done, the interview was over. He pulled her into a hug that she had not realized she needed. His arms were thin but strong, and he smelled like cheap soap and second-hand textbooks. She let herself lean into him for 3 seconds, then pulled away because if she stayed there any longer she might start crying. It is okay, Marcus said, his voice cracking. There will be other jobs, other chances. But they both knew that was not true. Chances like Benton Systems did not come to people like them. They came once, if you were lucky, and if you missed them they did not come back. Tanya nodded anyway because what else could she do? The apartment felt smaller than usual, as if the walls had moved closer while she was gone. The overhead light flickered the way it always did, a symptom of wiring that should have been replaced decades ago. On the counter sat an envelope with a red stamp. Past due. Tanya picked it up, looked at the amount, then set it back down. She pulled out her phone and typed Henry Preston into the search bar. The internet in their building was terrible, worse at night when everyone was home streaming shows they could not afford. The page loaded in painful increments. Founder, Chairman Emeritus, Benton Systems. The words assembled themselves into meaning, and Tanya felt her breath catch. The man she had saved was not just anyone. He was the person who built the company she had been trying to join. The irony was so sharp it could have drawn blood. She had sacrificed her interview to save the life of the man who could have hired her. The screen froze. The little spinning circle appeared, mocking her with its endless rotation. She stared at Henry Preston's pixelated face on a partially loaded biography page, his features caught mid-render, ghostly and incomplete. Then the connection died completely, leaving her with a blank screen. Marcus had gone back to his homework, but his eyes kept darting to her, worried and young. The silence between them was thick with things neither of them knew how to say. Outside, someone shouted. A car alarm went off and then stopped. The normal sounds of a neighborhood that had learned to live with disappointment. Tanya retrieved the business card from her bag and set it on the counter. It sat there catching the flickering light, cream-colored and pristine against the stained laminate. She fell asleep that night with the cards still on the counter, wondering what it meant to do the right thing when the right thing cost you everything. The phone call came the next morning while Tanya was pouring coffee that tasted like regret. Her hand jerked at the first ring, splashing brown liquid across the counter. The same number from yesterday. Human Resources. Her heart did something complicated in her chest, a gymnastics routine of hope and dread performed without a safety net. Miss Reed. This is Jennifer from Benton Systems. We had a scheduling conflict with our interviewer yesterday. The woman's voice was bright, professional. We have a new slot available this afternoon at 3. Would you still be interested? Tanya's throat closed. She tried to speak and produced only a sound that might have been yes or might have been a sob. She cleared her throat and tried again. Yes, I can be there. Wonderful. We look forward to seeing you. The line went dead. Tanya stood holding her phone, staring at the coffee stain spreading across the counter. A second chance. The universe, it seemed, occasionally remembered mercy. She borrowed an iron from the neighbor and pressed her interview blouse until every wrinkle surrendered. She practiced answers to questions while standing in front of the bathroom mirror. The truth was too complicated for interviews. How do you explain that you need this job the way other people need oxygen? That your brother's future depends on it? The train ride downtown felt different this time. The same route, but the landscape had changed. Or maybe she had changed. She watched the city slide past the windows, buildings growing taller and shinier as they approached the business district. And then she saw it. Benton Systems headquarters. Glass and steel reaching toward the sky like a monument to ambition. The lobby was everything she had imagined and nothing she was prepared for. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine. A reception desk that looked more expensive than her entire apartment. People in expensive suits moving with the particular confidence of those who had never worried about rent. Tanya felt every thread of her second-hand blouse, every scuff on her shoes. And then she saw the portrait. It hung on the wall behind the reception desk, enormous and impossible to miss. An oil painting in a gilded frame. The man from the station. The man from the hospital. Henry Preston. But here he looked younger, stronger, painted in the prime of his power. Beneath the portrait, a brass plaque read Henry Preston, founder, 1952 to present. The floor tilted. She grabbed the edge of a nearby planter, her fingers digging into cold ceramic. The old man she had saved had not just worked at Benton Systems. He had built it, created it from nothing, and she had let him collapse on a train platform while she knelt in the rain. Except she was here now, standing in his lobby, about to interview for a position at his company. Miss Reed. She turned. The receptionist was smiling at her with perfect teeth and a perfectly professional expression. Yes, Tanya managed. Mr. Preston asked to see you personally. He is waiting in conference room A. I will take you there now. The words made no sense. Mr. Preston. Personally? Her brain tried to process this information and failed. She followed the receptionist down a hallway lined with more portraits, more brass plaques. They stopped in front of a door made of frosted glass. He asked that we tell you there was a special request for your interview, the receptionist said. Good luck. The door opened, and Tanya's life split into before and after. Henry Preston sat at the head of a conference table that could have seated 20 people but held only him. He looked better than he had in the hospital. Color had returned to his face, and he wore a suit tailored to precision. But his eyes held the same sharp intelligence. He stood when Tanya entered. She wanted to run. Instead, her feet carried her forward until she stood across from him, the expanse of polished wood between them like an ocean. Miss Reed. His voice was warm. Please, sit. She sat because her legs would not hold her much longer. Her hands found each other in her lap, fingers squeezing until the pressure hurt. Henry settled back and regarded her with an expression that held something adjacent to kindness. I have spent the last 24 hours thinking about what happened at that station, he said. You saw a person and you stopped. Not an opportunity. Not a transaction. A person. He leaned forward. In my younger days, I was rushing to a meeting. An elderly woman had fallen on the sidewalk. I saw her. I looked right at her. And I kept walking because the meeting was more important. I told myself someone else would help. But I never forgot the choice I made that day. The conference room felt too small suddenly. Tanya's eyes stung with tears she could not afford to shed. Not here. Not now. You gave me something I did not deserve, Henry continued. A second chance. So I would like to offer you the same. He slid a folder across the table. I want you to be my executive assistant. $85,000 per year, full benefits, and a scholarship fund for your brother's education. The numbers made no sense. Tanya stared at the folder as if it might contain a bomb. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The contract was there, official and impossible, with her name typed at the top. "I do not understand," she whispered. "I have no experience. I never even finished college. If I cannot keep up, if I fail." "Experience trains," Henry interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of decades building empires. "Character chooses. You chose to stop when everyone else kept walking. That tells me everything I need to know." A woman in a business suit entered, carrying a tablet. She introduced herself as the HR director and began explaining the terms. "Background check. Start date contingent on clearance. Benefits package." The words washed over Tanya like water over stone. "This is real?" Tanya finally managed, her voice breaking. "This is actually happening?" Henry smiled then, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "It is real. You saved my life, Miss Reed. Let me help you build yours." Tanya's hands shook as she signed the contract. The pen felt heavy, as if she were signing her name in something more permanent than ink. When she finished, she looked up at Henry Preston. "If I cannot keep up, you will let me go. Promise me that." "I do not want charity." "This is not charity," Henry said quietly. "This is investment. And I have built my fortune on knowing which investments will pay dividends." Outside the conference room, the city continued its usual chaos. But inside, everything had changed. Tanya walked out carrying a folder that contained her future, and for the first time in years, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. 6 months transformed Tanya Reed in ways that photographs could not capture. She still woke at 4 in the morning, but now it was habit rather than necessity. The apartment she shared with Marcus had windows that let in sunlight. The refrigerator contained food that had not been marked down for quick sale. Small miracles that felt enormous. The real change happened at Benton Systems, in an office with her name on the door. Henry Preston had kept his word. He trained her with patience that bordered on paternal, teaching her not just mechanics but philosophy. When she made mistakes, he corrected her with firm gentleness that suggested he saw not who she was but who she could become. The promotion came on a Tuesday morning. Henry handed her a folder with a new title, Director of the Kindness First Initiative. A program she had mentioned once, casually, over coffee. An idea about giving back. "You understand what it means to be seen," Henry had said. "That makes you the only person who can lead this." The numbers accumulated like evidence of transformation. 28 scholarships awarded to students who worked multiple jobs and dreamed impossible dreams. 25 employees receiving financial assistance when emergencies threatened to drown them. 10,000 hours of volunteer work logged by Benton Systems staff, each hour a small rebellion against the idea that profit and compassion could not coexist. Tanya stood before a wall in the Benton lobby where photographs documented every scholarship recipient, every family helped, every life changed. Her own face appeared in one photo, shaking hands with Henry at the initiative's launch. She barely recognized herself. The exhaustion had been replaced by something that looked dangerously close to peace. The most unexpected change happened at Eddie's diner, where Tanya still sometimes ate breakfast. Eddie, who had watched her work double shifts, now ran a catering business. Benton Systems had awarded him a contract to provide meals for company events. His success had allowed him to hire 3 new employees and expand to a second location. "You did this," Eddie said when she visited, gesturing at the new espresso machine. "You showed them we were worth seeing." But she had not done it alone. Every scholarship, every helping hand extended, carried Henry Preston's fingerprints. He attended every ceremony, shook every hand, remembered every name. And sometimes, late in the afternoon when the office grew quiet, he would stand at his window and stare at the city with an expression that suggested he was seeing ghosts. One afternoon, Tanya joined his silent vigil. They stood side by side, 2 people separated by decades but united by a moment on a train platform. "I was young once," Henry said. "So focused on the next deal, the next victory. I built an empire, but I walked past 100 people who needed help to do it. You gave me something I thought I had lost. The ability to stop, to see, to choose differently." Tanya felt her throat tighten. She thought about the girl she had been 6 months ago, desperate and exhausted, standing in the rain while a train pulled away. That girl had made a choice without knowing it would save 2 lives instead of 1. "You taught me that kindness is not weakness," she said quietly. "It is the hardest kind of strength." Henry turned from the window and smiled, and in that smile was every scholarship awarded. Every life changed, every moment when someone chose to stop instead of walking past. "Then we have taught each other well." 2 years after the rain and the collapsed man and the train that pulled away without her, Tanya Reid stood on the platform at Milwaukee Station. She was here for a meeting downtown, wearing a suit that fit properly and shoes that did not hurt her feet. The girl who had knelt in puddles felt like someone from a previous life. But some things remained constant. The mechanical rhythm of trains, the crowd moving in their individual bubbles, and then, an elderly voice trembling with confusion. "Excuse me, I cannot find the auditorium. My granddaughter is graduating today." The old man stood near the station map, his hands shaking as they held a printed invitation folded so many times the creases had begun to tear. He wore a suit that hung oddly on his frame. His eyes moved across the crowd with desperate hope. Tanya stopped walking. Of course she stopped. She approached him with a smile that felt natural now. "May I help you find it?" Relief washed across his face like sunrise. He showed her the invitation, and Tanya felt something click into place. The school name was familiar. She checked the Benton System's scholarship database. There it was. The granddaughter's name. One of their recipients. One of the 28 lives changed because someone had chosen to stop. "I know exactly where this is," Tanya said. "I will take you there myself." The drive across the city gave them time to talk. His name was Robert. He had raised his granddaughter after her parents died in a car accident when she was 7. He worked as a janitor at an elementary school, retiring last year after 35 years. His hands bore the evidence of that labor, calloused but gentle. "She is the first in our family to graduate college," he said, his voice cracking. "I saved everything I could, but it was not enough. Then this scholarship came. Like a miracle." Tanya's throat tightened. She thought about all the paperwork, all the committee meetings, all the late nights reviewing applications. She had never met this man or his granddaughter, but she had helped change their story. They arrived at the auditorium with minutes to spare. Tanya walked him inside, found his seat, and waited while families filled the rows. When the graduates processed and wearing caps and gowns, Robert gripped the armrest so hard his knuckles went white. And when his granddaughter's name was called, when she walked across that stage and accepted her diploma, the old man wept. Tanya sat beside him and wept too. Perhaps because 2 years ago she had been desperate and poor. Perhaps because kindness had found her when she needed it most. Perhaps because the train she missed had become the life she chose. The next morning, Henry Preston stood before the entire company and announced a new policy. The kindness delay protection. Any employee who arrived late because they stopped to help someone in need would be protected. No disciplinary action. Because sometimes, he explained, losing a moment meant finding your purpose. Tanya listened from the back of the room and thought about trains and platforms and moments when everything changes. She thought about the girl she had been, kneeling in the rain beside a stranger. "The train I missed became the line I chose." Sometimes, losing a moment means finding your life. The train she missed became the life she chose. And maybe that's true for all of us. The things we lose aren't always endings. Sometimes, they're the beginning of something we were meant to find. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in kindness. And subscribe, because there are more stories like this waiting for you. Thank you for watching. This has been Story Theater.